under Virginia. No. Should I start over? Albemarle County's continuity of government ordinance and declaration of a local state of emergency in the EDA resolution of April 22nd, 2020. We are holding this meeting by real-time electronic means with no authority member physically present at a single central location. This is because the pandemic's catastrophic nature makes it impracticable or unsafe to assemble in a single location. All authority members are participating electronically. All authority members will identify themselves and state their general physical location during the roll call, which we will hold next. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county's website. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom, real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is invited to offer live comment during the public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and must be germane to matters on today's agenda. Richie, can you call the roll?
I will do so. Thank you. Let's see, Director Long.
Present in Crozet.
Director Ray.
Present in Albemarle County.
Director Shreve.
Present in Albemarle County.
Director Munson.
Present in beautiful blooming Scottsville.
Director Imhoff.
Present in Albemarle County.
And understand Director McNaughton is absent. He hasn't logged on.
Nope.
Director Matola.
Present in Crozet.
All right.
That's 6. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum and can proceed.
Okay. And I guess at some point during this meeting, we probably need to talk about maybe in other matters or unfinished business, sort of how talk about the county's policy for virtual meetings going forward so that we can know what our marching orders are. So matters from the public. Do we have anyone who has signed up to speak?
Mr. Chair, we had no one sign up to speak.
Okay, has anyone indicated that they would like to speak? I haven't seen it, so.
Not that I can see either.
Okay, all right, then let's go to the minutes. Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes?
No, I move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 All right, the minutes are approved. Financial report. Do we have a financial report?
We do.
Okay,
For fiscal year 2022, which began July 1, and through for information we have through February 28th, we've got operating revenues of $101,618.34 against operating expenditures of $422,696.39. This goes along with pass-through funding of $415,021.39 and pass-through expenditures thus far of $23,200. The operating expenditure are comprised chiefly of 3 components: payments to Firefly, CIC, and Habitat for Humanity. Along with that, we have net revenues thus far this fiscal year, $70,743.34. Along with our accounts payable and receivable, and the cash balance at the beginning of the fiscal year of $731,824.27. That leaves us with a cash position or cash equivalent position of $831,768.01. And as an asterisk, we should note that for committed funds, we have 109,000 of EDA funds still committed but not expended to go along with $543,015 in committed county funds.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Any questions or comments on the financial report? All right, then on to new business. The first matter in new business is the loan payoff by Southwood Charlottesville LLC and execution of deed of release and lease termination by the Economic Development Authority. And Connor Childress from Scott Kroner is here to present. I don't know if there's anything, Roger or JT, that you guys want to say first before we hand it over to Connor.
As any good facilitator would do, I would not only turn it over to Connor, I would also turn it over to Council Deloria, who is going to speak to this issue and kind of provide a historic perspective as well.
All right, welcome, Connor. Thanks for joining us.
Richie, could you provide a little background for the EDA directors so they understand the history of this particular scenario?
So in 2007, Habitat purchased a number of parcels from the Minor family. And the purchase price for that was $6 million. They executed a note to purchase the property. In 2010, Habitat it was named Southwood Charlottesville. It had made arrangements with the EDA for the EDA to assume that note. So through and there were certain advantages that worked to the parties' benefits for that arrangement to happen. So long story short is the EDA assumed a $6 million obligation that was secured by a deed that was presented to the EDA for Connor can correct me. I think it was 3 parcels, might have been 4 parcels. That was an unrecorded deed that the EDA received in 2010 to hold a security for the note. Habitat through Southwood Charlottesville had agreed to pay the installments on that note essentially through rent payments. So they leased the EDA leased the property to Habitat. Habitat agreed to pay the installments on the notes by way of rent, and that went directly to the previous owners. There were a couple, I think a couple amendments or modifications that occurred over the life of that loan. And at this point in time, Habitat through Southwood Charlottesville is interested in refinancing that debt. So there was a bit of a long and lengthy history, but it's actually pretty straightforward, pretty simple. They have plans and arrangements to refinance the debt that will release the EDA from the note. And as part and parcel of that, the Habitat would like a deed of release from the EDA and also a termination agreement for the lease. And that's fairly standard and it applies with the terms of the lease and the terms of the deed. So there really isn't any controversy here. The only catch is that they haven't refinanced at this point in time. So in terms of the resolution that the EDA is asked to adopt, it authorizes the chair or the vice chair to execute the documents that Mr. Childress has prepared. Bond counsel has reviewed those, and I've reviewed those, and they're appropriate. But they will be held once they're signed. They will be held in escrow until we get a closing date, and then they'll be provided to the settlement company to be held until everything's taken care of. So it had a long and somewhat difficult history for us to put back together, but we did, and it's all pretty straightforward. So the recommendation is to adopt the resolution. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Childress. I don't know if he has anything to add.
You know, Mr. Deloria, my spiel just got taken, I think. So you did a great job. Thank you for summarizing it. Thank you all for having me on. I'm happy to answer any questions. But I can't say it any better than Mr. Deloria just said it.
All right. No questions, I guess. So I guess we're just going to get the document signed and send them to the safe harbor holding it, and then they can release it when everything's paid.
That's right. And I'm happy if you all want to hold them until I can tell you a closing date, like Mr. Deloria just said, that's fine.
Okay. Whatever works the best. So. All right. Then I think if there are no other questions, we have a resolution, correct? So, any questions about the resolution? If there are not, is there a motion regarding the resolution?
I move that we approve the resolution, excuse me.
All right.
Second it.
Is there a second? Did I hear a second? Okay. Any discussion on the resolution? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Can we do
Aye.
roll call? Can we do roll call on this?
certainly.
All right. And I'll call the roll. Let's see, Director Long,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Shreve,
Aye.
Director Munson,
Aye.
Director Imhoff,
Aye.
and Director Matola.
Aye.
All right, so the motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, Connor. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Take care.
All right, so the next item is the Executive Director's Report. Roger?
Thank you, Chair. Fellow directors, before I get started, let me just thank Richie for his contribution to that last piece of business. While it sounded pretty simple, we had to put it back together by parts and parcel, and Richie was a big factor in doing that. Thank you very much, Counselor. Next slide, please, JT. Just a couple of items I thought would be of interest to the directors. First, you probably noticed that the county executive provided a recommended budget for 2023 to the Board of Supervisors. And I just wanted to highlight in there an important element for the success of economic development, and that is the recommendations to use year-end savings to reinvest into economic development. For those who are new on our board, you're probably aware we have a regular budget, but we also have no way of ongoing funding for our economic development projects. The board, the county exec, in their ultimate wisdom, said we can't operate that way without having funding set aside and in advance to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. Our processes would take too long for appropriation. So our board has heard the recommendation from Jeff, Mr. Richardson, to put $5 million back into the economic development investment pool. And that would sort of reestablish our investment pool that we have been spending over the last 4 years or so, and is getting lowered as every project comes along. And I just wanted to say that listening to the Board of Supervisors, they were very supportive of this in their initial comments. While this is still in process, I wanted to note that our liaison, Supervisor McKeel in particular, made some public comments that were very supportive. So the board is in general has been supportive, as has the county executive, and I thought that would be important information for the directors to know. So thank you, Supervisor McKeel. Also updating this group, it had a special interest in what was happening with the land capacity analysis for economic development. Our team has continually been working with community development as well as Kimley Horn to wrap that report up. We expect this particular authority to receive the results sometime in April or May, contingent. I don't know if it's going to go to the board first or the EDA or the board first. Nonetheless, we're wrapping that up and we'll have that information to share at a later time. Also want to make you aware that the building reuse grant has not fallen off our radar screen. We continue to work on that. We expect to have a draft policy back to you all in either April or May's board meeting, hopefully for adoption and a new tool in the economic development toolbox. So those are some brief announcements. The Broadway blueprint study, as well as the designated outdoor refreshment area, will take just a minute, and we have some additional slides to share with you. So by way of history, I want to make some of you aware that we started this Broadway blueprint study some 2.5, 3 years ago. The general idea was to take the 46.5 acres that are located on the Broadway corridor. For those who may be watching at home, that's the area where Woolen Mills is located, and it extends up to the city line, and turn that into a place that people, businesses, and activity all occur at the same time, and everyone would like to be there. So we started the Broadway blueprint study, and as we got ready to make our final original recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, COVID hit. And so we presented a draft final proposal to the Board of Supervisors, which included recommendations such as creating a business association for the corridor. It included the contemplation of an arts or cultural district overlay to promote the arts in that area. It included recommendations for increased pedestrian and bike connectivity. It also included the design and the study for a multimodal streetscape to enhance public transportation and visit all businesses on the Broadway street corridor on a recurring basis to make sure we're keeping our finger on the pulse of what's happening there and keep that place relevant in the future. Well, as luck would have it, COVID hit, so we got postponed just a little bit before we could report that. And during that time frame, the county adopted a new core value of community, which really is a focus on equity and inclusion. So we took a pause, and if you'll go to the next slide, JT, we took a pause and looked at the Broadway corridor study with the new equity lens. And so we have a second round of recommendations coming forward. It's in the Board of Supervisors packet today, and they'll receive this as a consent agenda item tomorrow. But the new recommendations include connectivity to all outside communities, including the city. We were talking about it being a county-only type project, but there's some surrounding neighborhoods that we believe it makes sense to connect to as well. It also includes targeted programming and the use of public space to serve the broader neighborhoods. While it's very difficult to stop market conditions and gentrification in general, we do want to make this a place for all people. And one way we could do that would be programming that would be attractive to the surrounding neighborhoods, and or creating public space that the surrounding neighborhoods could use or utilize. It included considering additional strategies to limit gentrification of smaller businesses who find the Broadway corridor is a reasonable cost place to conduct business. The only strategies that we were able to locate, and this includes through the Office of Equity and Inclusion, were either land ownerships or underwriting or subsidies to help lower the cost. The market rates are going up all across our community, but in particular on the Broadway corridor as well. Another strategy recommended by the Office of Equity and Inclusion is to conduct proactive community engagement throughout the planning process. Right now we're studying this project will be sent over to community development to create a small area plan, but the recommendation is to engage all the surrounding communities, which will take some targeted outreach for certain neighborhoods that don't always show up to community events. And then the other recommendation is creating free public transportation for all. There was some conversation about the public transportation being restricted to those who are generally paying for that. We have an agreement with the developer of Woolen Mills, Willow Tree, and ourselves to create public transportation connecting the Broadway corridor to the downtown area. We want that to be free public transportation for all as a recommendation. So that concludes sort of an update on the Broadway study that you heard about some 2 years ago. I'll stop here and entertain any comments or address any questions that you may have.
I'd love to just jump in and say I'm just so wowed by this project overall. Just think it's going to be a great contributor to the community. And I've also been following, as I'm sure you have as well, the Ravenna Bridge, different options for that, which could also lead into and blend into this project. So, hats off. I think this is a really good overall community project. Thank you.
Yeah,
Roger,
I was
this is,
wondering, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Roger, when the board discussed this project initially, going back to those entrepreneurs that were struggling to afford and keep their space, Roger, the group of folks that I'm talking about that
I do. I'm very aware of that group. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, can you just update us a little bit on that?
Yeah, JT, can you go back a slide? I'm sorry, it was on the slide that you had it on. My apologies. Supervisor McKeel, if you will look at the third bullet here, maybe I didn't go into great detail. We went out to find out what practices were there to limit gentrification. And what we discovered was there was no successful way to control market conditions. We just could not figure out a way that local government could control the market conditions. The rates are what they are, as the free market sort of dictates what the rates were. So the only strategies we found that were successful to prevent gentrification would be the EDA or the board actually owning or controlling property in the Broadway corridor itself, or providing subsidies to those folks who are located there. And that could be subsidies directly to those individuals or subsidies to the landowner that offset the cost of rent in that particular area. Now, we're not recommending that as a strategy. We're just recommending that we consider that as a strategy, and the board would be the final dictator of whether or not we adopt that strategy.
Roger, are you talking about businesses who are renting space? Is that not residential?
That is correct. We're talking about, there are a host of art and cultural and unique entrepreneurial and small businesses that are co-located in a couple of buildings down there. And as the Willow Mills and the Broadway corridor have been developing, the cost of doing business on that corridor has increased. Those particular businesses came forth and spoke out about their concerns of the lack or dearth of lower cost industrial space. So the board asked us to come back with some strategies which may prevent the gentrification of those small businesses. And some of those businesses are making that area a pretty cool place to be. And so those strategies that we found are land ownership or site control. Maybe we lease the space and sublet it for below market rates, or maybe we buy property down there or provide subsidies to keep the rents down. But those were the only way that we felt that we would not gentrify those businesses. It's going to require some sort of participation in order to prevent that from happening. And that's just happening organically now. So we're just trying to get out in front of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that expanded discussion, because the Board of Supervisors were certainly concerned about those businesses. We've talked about them several times. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Roger, I think it is smart to look in these directions. I think you're right that, trying to manipulate the marketplace is pretty much a dead end, but and that we have to go to these other alternatives. What percentage of those businesses are leasing space versus owning property there? I'm guessing most of them lease from other persons. Is that correct? Other entities?
Yes, they're generally owned by one person and leased. The predominant number, I don't know if the percentages, JT, maybe you know the percentages off the top of your head, but most of those folks are a non-owner occupant and they're leased out.
So one potential component of this strategy would not be helping the business owners acquire property. Is that correct? Or is that something to consider also?
Yeah, Dave, I think that's a strategy we could look at. If you mean, for example, we could certainly increase the access to capital for those small businesses through an organization like the CIC. If they're going to locate in a designated area, we'd probably have to create an overlay district first in order to identify the boundaries for which you'd be eligible. But certainly that we can add that to the list.
Okay, yeah, and the reason I think of that is I did talk to Stephen Davis at CIC about that kind of a strategy and whether he thought it would work anywhere, not specifically here. But on top of that, it may be that we get more bang for our subsidy buck in that regard, as opposed to doing it the other way, where the effect is sometimes all too temporary.
Well, we'll further vet that suggestion. Thank you, Director.
Any other, Stuart, did you have something?
Yeah, this was actually, Dan asked exactly what I was going to ask about. We're struggling with a very similar issue down here in Scottsville. We're looking at whether to approve a special use permit and for what us is a big development of about 36 houses down here. And one of the things that we really would like to see is some affordable housing up there, but we have not been able to figure out a way to make that happen from a special use permit condition perspective. So this has been a really interesting discussion. I don't really have a good answer either, unfortunately.
Seeing no other comments or questions, JT, if you'll go on to the next slide, I'll continue. You may have read about some new legislation that was passed at the state level, and it is for designated outdoor refreshment areas. We call that a DORA. Next slide, please. So what is a DORA? It's a geographic area licensed by the ABC annually that allows the consumption of alcoholic beverages, wine, beer, mixed beverages, within public spaces or inside a business without an ABC license, as long as the business owner agrees. An example, which happened down in Scottsville, Director Munson, was that they held an event in Saturday where they had a designated outdoor refreshment area. And you can see on this particular slide, the area that was designated. You can see it in red, and thank you, in that particular area and the participating businesses. Scottsville did it. We reached out to the town administrator, Matt Lawless. He identified that it was very successful, that the businesses saw a significant uptick in sales and revenues. So although we have only a small sample size, those that we do have was very successful for that particular area. So what's needed to establish a DORA? You must obtain an ABC license, and the eligible applicants are a locality or a business improvement district, which we don't have, or a nonprofit organization. What's allowed is up to 16 events per year. Each event can be no longer than 3 days. You need a letter of support from the locality. In this case, it would be Albemarle County. You have to submit an ABC application, and there's a fee associated with that. And that fee goes up if you want to do more than 16 events per year. And what's needed is you need a map specifying the scope and scale of a designated outdoor refreshment area, which includes the date and hours of operation.
Roger, I'm sorry. Can you go back to the previous slide a sec?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I didn't get down to that third section there. Okay, thank you.
And you need a public safety plan, which would include things about ingress, egress, security guards, where is the designated drop-off areas and pickup areas, particularly as it relates to Lyft or Uber, is one of those requirements. It also requires a specific container. So you have to have a designated container so that it's clearly identified that you purchased a beverage from a brick and mortar location, and it's in one of these containers, and you must carry the alcohol around the container. And there's some other sort of requirements with the logo that are necessary. This will allow you to take a beverage into an operation, an existing business. Now you can't take a beverage from you can't purchase it at one location and then turn around and carried into another location that also sells alcohol, you must consume it all before moving into the next location. Other requirements, you must have signage to designate where the actual area is itself, sort of the borders of the area, to identify where alcohol is allowed and not allowed. Unlike a normal permitting requirement, it usually requires boundaries and other sorts of ID checks and the like. In this scenario, their responsibility is on the actual businesses themselves. I will mention that you're not allowed to just sell open. You're not allowed to sell alcohol openly. It must be purchased from a brick and mortar business. You see the Scottsville example. It also requires volunteers and security to make sure the event remains safe. For the most part, these would be ambassadors, as we probably wouldn't want to have 2 a.m. Completion times for a designated outdoor refreshment area. And here's a couple examples. As we went and conducted some due diligence, we found Ohio, the state of Ohio itself, has had this in place and a little more advanced than the state of Virginia. This is just an example from Kent, Ohio, how they designated an area. And I believe we also have an example of Mason, Ohio. You see, they do it a little differently, but the area is designated when and where things can happen and who's participating. And then there's some additional signage that would be helpful that may not be required, but if a local business was located inside of a designated outdoor refreshment area, but didn't want alcohol in their particular business, they could put a sign that says they're a participating establishment or an exempt establishment, meaning we would prefer you not to bring alcohol in here. You'll have to either dispose of it or drink before entering our facility. So with that being said, we wanted to entertain your thoughts about the appropriateness of a designated outdoor refreshment area in Albemarle County. So I'll pause here and listen to your comments.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Roger said, ours was a big success, and we've actually done the second one after that as well too. We saw significant increase in traffic, both on the street and in businesses, and we had no problems whatsoever. At least in this environment, we found if you treat people like adults, they'll act like adults. So I'm a big supporter of them. I think they're great. We are planning a lot of additional ones for the rest of the year.
Stuart, what were your times? I didn't see it on the brochure. My eyes maybe were.
Yeah, as I recall, it was early afternoon to early evening. So we combined it with an art walk. So we wanted to have daylight for people to see the streetscape. So I think it ended 7-ish or something like that in the evening and started 11 because we want to have people come down for lunch.
Roger, question for you. Do you think this is what City of Charlottesville is using? Are they doing Adora as part of their 2-day block party in April?
They are. It's for Tom Tom, and that is exactly what they're doing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
This is different than, I believe there's a regulation that would allow, in essence, a food court to serve alcohol amongst various restaurants. I think that's a different thing than what you're talking about, correct?
That's correct, Chair. And you're talking about a special permit to do an event, and that will allow for anyone to sell alcohol and or food trucks and the like. This is different in that it requires the brick and mortar to sell the alcohol.
Well, actually, what I was talking about is an alternative where you have businesses and it's like just a full-time. I know there've been some discussions about different places where you'd have restaurants that surround an open area and that you could, take your alcohol out into that area, not so much go into different ones. But it sounds like
this would allow for both areas and inside of businesses.
Okay.
So like sidewalks, crossing streets, those types of things.
But it's specific. It's more event focused than just a general. I mean, could you have one that would be there all the time?
No, sir.
Okay.
It's limited to 16 events per year, no later than 3 days. It's not like New Orleans where you can just carry it around all the time. Yeah.
Well, there is that third bullet point though. Is that was that introduced to allow for something like that?
Well, I don't know if it's 24/7. I think that's in the event you wanted more than 16 events.
I see, but not,
Yeah.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, having lived in South Louisiana, I know exactly what you're talking about there with the drive-through daiquiris and so forth. But, yeah, we don't aim to reproduce that.
You know, it strikes me that Scottsville's perfect for this, and, you know, potentially Crozet, kind of where you have some sort of city center feeling and a place to sort of roam around. I guess I'd be curious what recommendations you might have, Roger, or other folks on staff of other places that this might make sense.
Well, yeah, I'll be happy to share my recommendation. I think it's a fantastic idea. Coming from North Carolina, we saw they have different regulations, but it resulted in a similar sort of culture and environment. And they were hugely successful, but for the rare occasion. And those rare occasions usually involved like either a rock concert or a rap concert, and it required additional levels of security that we're not talking about here. I couldn't, based off of my experience, if it was to promote those types of things, I would have a difficult time recommending to this group or the board that we would want that in our community. So, it requires the support of the local government. Well, we'll run this through our board at a later date if we have an application, but your comments are welcome as well. That would be my recommendation to them. We have met with the Albemarle County Police Department to solicit their feedback. They're generally supportive of this. They did ask if there could be a caveat if any of these events ever became problematic. Can we just have those canceled? And we're gonna have to research that. We didn't know the answer. We just met with them today. So that's my overall, they've been hugely successful. They were hugely successful in North Carolina, as well as the recent events that we know of here.
Or is there one more question? Were you considering any of the sort of other commercial centers in Albemarle County? Is there some other geographic locations that sort of occurred to you?
There is. It would make sense for me that Stonefield would be a good
That's what I was
location
going to
as
ask.
well.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, because it's sort of a downtown, it has a street, right? And that atmosphere of a downtown.
Yeah, we looked at it from an economic development perspective as what primarily as a way to bring people down here, and we collaborated with the Scottsville Center for Arts and Natural Environment. So someplace like Stonefield would be perfect because they've got the vendors, they've got the brick and mortars there already, and you've got businesses that will benefit from it, and so it's a nice synergistic kind of effect.
Connection to music industry as well, so they could always combine it with performance. Well,
I'm gonna assume that if there are any non-starters, someone would raise their hand and let us know. I'm going to take this as general support, and we'll share this feedback with the board when the time's appropriate.
Sounds great.
Wanted to talk a little bit about a general idea related to affordable housing. And I know that you all are pretty familiar with this, but I think it's important that we educate the community about what we're talking about here. So bear with me as I digress just a little bit and talk about the mechanics of tax increment financing. Next slide, please. We at Albemarle County use a synthetic TIF in that we look at it at project by project and determine the tax value, the future tax value, and what the rebates may be. The TIF itself is usually a whole geographic area that's identified in advance, and then that area is eligible for tax increment finance. And we look at it project specific, but in general, you can look at a property and that property has a baseline value. And then after that property is developed, it has a new value, which is greater than the original baseline value. That variance between the baseline value and the new appraised value post-development is called the tax increment. that tax increment is going to generate additional revenue. And those additional revenues are utilized to make projects happen that wouldn't happen otherwise, or include public elements that wouldn't be included otherwise, in that the project itself would not be financially feasible. Next slide, please. We call that the but-for requirement. And I've just got one example here for the community to illustrate how this happens. On the left-hand side, you'll see a dilapidated parking deck in Wilmington, North Carolina. When I was working there, we tried to find a developer who would build something on our riverfront to include a parking structure. Well, as we spoke with the development community, they came back with a unanimity that says, you can't build something on this particular property that includes a parking structure and make a profit. So what you do is you create a synthetic tax increment financing to offset the cost of building the parking structure by rebating taxes that makes that project financially feasible that wouldn't otherwise have been. In this scenario, you'll see what the parking deck looked like some 8 years ago. And in the top right-hand corner, you can see what that parking structure looks like now. And JT, I see that you are carrying the mouse. If you would go to that little white area that's kind of in the background to my left, you can see there's condos built on the outside, but the parking deck is now wrapped a little bit further to your left, JT, right there. That's actually a parking structure, but it's wrapped by condos in the front and condos to its right that hides it and makes it aesthetically pleasing. And so now you're able to do build a project that was not financially feasible otherwise, and build what the community want. The community, the business district needed the parking downtown for their customers. The community wanted a better, more aesthetic down riverfront, and the community also wanted some residents downtown. So this is how you can use tax increment financing to accomplish something that wouldn't otherwise happen. So that's just one example. So the question for you as directors is, do you think the Economic Development Authority would have an interest in using this synthetic tax increment financing to help affordable housing be built in our community? We have one application working down the pipeline to consider this. RST is their name. We had another affordable housing group contact us, ask if we'd be willing to do this. We being the Economic Development Authority. I had to excuse Don Long from the conversation initially because his wife is participating or at least representing one of the applicants. So I reached out to Vice Chair Ray, and the Vice Chair said, yeah, I believe this is worthy of a conversation. So I'm bringing this forth to solicit your feedback and comments.
Yeah, it seems like another tool that we could potentially use to encourage, affordable housing. As I mentioned, there's very few of them at this point that we have. And we're struggling with how do we get a developer down here to build something and, have them make enough profit to make it worthwhile and still have price these things in some sort of an affordable manner, or at least that will allow people from Scottsville and work in Scottsville to live in Scottsville, which is difficult given the price of housing around here. So, I think to have another tool to explore using in some specific cases, and I think makes a lot of sense.
The one weakness I see with this tool is that while a parking garage facility does have a lifetime, it won't necessarily or officially last forever. It does imply a kind of a more permanent public benefit for the money that you're expending. Whereas I think the experience with a lot of these with affordable housing is that the benefit conveyed tends to be temporary. So what I would like us to do, if we are interested in using this tool, and I think it could be used quite productively if we did it right, is to think creatively about how we could make the affordability component much more permanent than it usually is, so that you're not just conveying and there's some benefit to that. I mean, if it's like a 10-year, a decade-long benefit of affordability for a number of tenants, presumably some of those tenants might be able to use that period of affordability as a bridge to ownership on their own later. And so it's not without benefits, but that is one of the real weaknesses, is that it tends to be a temporary arrangement. And I think there might be ways where we can fix that, though. It's probably worth meditating on.
I would just chime in. That was exactly my concern, is just the length of time that you're able to lock in a rate that is defined as affordable. But I do think it's an important tool, and it's in a very, in the conversation about economic development, housing comes up all the time. So thanks for offering this up.
I'd like to mention two examples where the EDA has been active in the recent past in affecting a tax increment style of support for affordable housing projects. The first being Brookdale. It's a LIHTC project, 96 units overall for Old Lynchburg Road. That about a $1.5 million contribution in tax rebates through the EDA to help that project overcome some limitations on the affordability at the time when they were seeking those tax credits. I believe that the term of that, I think, is 15 years of affordability, I believe. Some of you were on, maybe not, they've been here and remember. The other, and more visibly, is the Southwood project, phase 1, which again, a pretty significant negotiation ultimately ended up in a performance agreement, which obviously requires the EDA's participation of a rebate of some expected increase in value and taxes to the county to help them make those investments, both in LIHTC and in habitat built homes, which ostensibly have a kind of a longer shelf life in terms of affordability. And so the absent housing authority, county doesn't have one. The Economic Development Authority has been the mechanism by which the county has to this point kind of considered how best to do that. So I just mentioned that because it's an important tool. It's an important role that you play for the county right now, important tool that you have. And I do appreciate the the conversations around how this might kind of shape the conversations that the board has from a policy perspective on developer incentives or making affordable housing much more permanent or more long lasting in our community. I do think that there's an important role that, whether it's in this case the Economic Development Authority or some future housing authority could play in that respect. But I did want to kind of call out those two examples because they're active in ones that this group your predecessors participated in. Thanks.
And the other thing that's kind of built into this, which is presents a little bit of a quandary, is that the way in which these are often promoted and sold and made attractive to the community is to suggest that you're going to have increased value and therefore increased property tax revenues in the out years as these projects take effect. And that's generally what happens, to at least to some extent, even though there's some case there where maybe it's a little bit too optimistic. But nonetheless, what you often see then is that there's, we know from incident studies that the increased property taxes are passed on to the residents when you have rental properties like this. So it does build in added pressure on the back end for, against keeping these units affordable. So that's kind of a tension or pressure that's automatically built in that we might want to try to anticipate.
My only comment, I'm certainly affordable housing, certainly an issue that we need to confront, and I am certainly supportive of that. I do think that as we continue the discussions about this, we need to be focused on the fact that we're sort of talking about two different things. There's the EDA's role as really just a conduit, where the county would say, we want you to, help affordable housing by providing this financing to, through a bond issuance in some format. And then there's the sort of more policy questions, which are the kind of things that Dave and Kat are talking about, is, from an EDA standpoint, an economic development standpoint, are we going to, what are our thoughts on how do we influence housing policy? And I think those are two somewhat different things that we just need to think about as we're doing it, because I think there's some things that we can do as an EDA to support the financial goals that really don't require our, exploring the policy issue. So
I think they are very distinct, not just somewhat, but quite distinct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that clear as we sort of talk about it, that, where our role is. And I know this is more of a generic discussion, and I certainly support the use of tax increment financing for projects, because I agree that it helps get things done. So
This might be a good tool for the Broadway corridor.
any other thoughts to share with Roger regarding this? All
Thank you,
right.
Chair. That concludes my report.
Okay. Thanks, Roger. The next item on the agenda is the Lewis and Clark Exploratory Center update. Malou Stark and Sarah Gran from the Exploratory Center are here, and I think they are going to get, Ashley will promote them just so everybody understands sort of what our process is. And I'll wait for Malou and Sarah to be, looks like they're in now. So we're going to have an open session now, and then we're going to have a closed session with members of the Exploratory Center to talk about some information that's some of their information that's proprietary. So once we have the public session, we'll then move into that closed session to meet with them on that, and then there'll be a further discussion with just the board. And then we have some other closed session matters that we'll also do with just the board. So welcome. Malou, are you gonna, or Sarah, who's gonna lead us off here with your presentation?
I'll lead off, and then Sarah, I've asked Sarah if she would join in with us. Thank you all for having us today. We have some new things to share with you and some old business that needs to be addressed with you. The pandemic, of course, dealt us a hefty blow, as it did, I think, most nonprofits. We were not able to open during most of the pandemic. We began very small last fall with very private small group tours of 2 or 3 people at a time. And then we made the board made the decision in January to go for the summer camps this year. So we have a full schedule of summer camps that we'll be offering this year. Schools still have not booked in large groups. They're still pretty leery of field trips. We've had a few, mainly private and homeschool groups booked for us, but not the normal public schools. Normally we serve about 5-6 counties with the public schools, and we are pretty heavily booked from this time of year, from about the 1st of March until the 1st of June with school groups, and then it starts back up in September. We've continued renting out our building, and we have been very successful during the pandemic in getting grants that we have gone after and have been awarded to us. We've had some unforeseen experiences, like a roof leak that came with our green roof. That is a construction flaw. We're going back on the original contractor to some degree on that, and we have received a grant to fix that, but it is leaking in through the building and caused some damage. We've also had a lot of increased visitors, and I'll just give you an example. Before the pandemic, we used to have around 3,000 visitors a month.
a weekend, excuse me, not a month, a weekend to Dardentown Park. That included soccer players, families, everybody. It's gone up to about 8,000 is the park's estimate now. That's a weekend. We were overrun with people using our facilities free, vandalism, bums, the whole 9 yards. And we were fortunate enough last fall to get a gate installed. That has definitely cut down tremendously on it. It's no fun to have a mother and a 3-year-old child. And this particular instance resonates with me because I was the one dealing with it while someone is shooting up heroin right in front of them. You're trying to protect the child, you're trying to protect the mother. And before we could have any of our groups there, any of the kids or anything else, we'd have to spend an hour to 2 hours a day cleaning up our site, not the park, our site. So this gate has definitely helped and it has protected us. This winter, we had a couple of instances of people breaking into the keelboat, which is outside. We keep the cabin locked normally, and spending the night. It was quite cozy in there with the captain's beds, and apparently it was quite well used. Needless to say, we have ended that little free camping site exhibit now. But those are some of the things that we have done. We continue to offer new programs, new educational programs, new environmental programs, and new exploration. We have an amphitheater that we have at the quarry where we can take them down and show them rocks. And so we are open for business now, and we are steadily increasing our visitation and our visibility. With that, if anybody has any questions, I'll try and answer them. And then Sarah can say whatever she feels like she needs to say. And we can, if it's okay with you, I'll go into the closed session.
Okay, thank you, Malou, Sarah. I forgot to mention before we started that we did have a meeting with Malou and Sarah, Dave and Alexandra Searles, the executive director, prior to this meeting, where we had a chance to sort of talk about things as well. So Sarah, do you have something you would like to add?
Well, first of all, I appreciate all of your time and being here. And also having a pre-meeting was very helpful to understand what the goals of the EDA are. Also, we had Ashley and JT help us with some of the technology piece, since this is a bit of a new format. So I first of all appreciate all of that. And you're seeing the name Zach Rand. My son uses my iPad for his virtual school. So this is not Zach, it is not school. But by the way, there was an outage. Let me just make a quick, note of that. And so school had some issues, but anyway, that's why you're seeing Zach Rand. And if he was here, he would be able to help me to change the name, but he's not. So anyway, that's why you're seeing Zach Rand. It's really Sarah Rand. So anyway, like I said, I really appreciate the cooperative attitude that we had. And when we were wanting to prepare for this meeting, we took away the thoughts and ideas that were addressed a week ago, and really wanted to hear what the EDA was saying about repayment of this loan, and that we take it seriously. And that what we heard was that I'm not going to go into the past. I was not on the board at that time. There's no reason to rehash that because we want to move forward. However, when we were talking a week ago, what you wanted in moving forward was a clear plan of repayment, and and better communication. So we want to provide that. Obviously, we would go into some more details about the finances in closed session, because there's some information that the executive director and the board didn't want to be shared. But I want to just, know that we had a board meeting. We brought these concerns to the board. The only reason we had that board meeting was to address this issue. So we take it seriously. And personally, as a resident taxpayer, property taxpayer, mom of 3, I personally take it seriously that, our debt be repaid to the best of the ability of the center and what we have available, right now and what we can do in the future, but we also want to be realistic and what we're able to do. So that's sort of where things are. And you know, we wanted to go in just a little more detail. I know Malou sent some documents that kind of went through some of the things that we're working on currently and what we have planned for the future, and also some more detail on the repayment plan. So,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for them right now before we go into closed session? All right, hearing none, we will, we need the closed session motion. Okay. So I will read this. I move that the Albemarle County Economic Development Authority go into a closed meeting as authorized by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.23711A of the Code of Virginia under subsection 6 to discuss and consider the investment of public funds for the development of downtown Crozet, the Lewis and Clark Exploratory Center at Dardentown Park, and Project Khaki, where bargaining is involved and where, if made public, initially would adversely affect the financial interests of the county. And subsection 8 to discuss and consider consultation with EDA legal counsel regarding the Lewis and Clark Exploratory Center loan, which requires legal counsel's advice, and if provided in open session, would adversely affect the EDA's negotiating posture. And subsection 39 to discuss and consider information subject to the exclusion in subdivision 3 of section 2.237.0.6 related to the economic development, to wit, the proprietary information voluntary provided by the Lewis and Clark Exploratory Center, a private business pursuant to a promise of confidentiality by the EDA upon the center's request and used by the EDA for business, trade, and tourism development or retention. All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a second. I believe that we do not need to call the roll for this. Is that correct, Richie?
Do not, we can do this by voice
All
vote.
right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved. So I believe JT or Ashley, you're going to switch to Teams. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, everyone, all the directors and invited guests should have received an email just moments ago with the link to the Teams meeting. I will remain here in the Zoom and open session for anybody that has difficulty accessing the Teams meeting, but that is that link has been sent, and if anyone doesn't have it, if you could please speak up now.
And so should we
can
leave this
troubleshoot.
Zoom meeting and then
Yes.
re-enter it? Okay.
Yes, we will. I will keep it open with my account and
Okay.
for the members of the public, and then we will go to Teams and have closed session, and then we'll send another link back to everyone to rejoin this Zoom.
Okay. Any questions before we leave about the process? Does everybody has everybody received the link?
Yep. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
Be on
well,
the other
let's,
side.
let's go for it. Thanks, JT.
Yeah.
Unknown caller.
Don was skiing, his picture was
Daniel, did you make it into this meeting? Was that you?
Yes, sir.
I know, I said, where is Don? It looks so beautiful. I mean, you're making us want to go live in another city.
Yeah, well, that's Sequoia National Park in California. So but I'm having some camera issues. I've discovered that Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I seem to be continuing to have video problems, so. Let's see,
Well, you're coming in loud and clear, so that's good. There you go.
there we go.
I'm counting 4 members, 4 directors, Don, Stewart, John, and Kat.
Roger needs to be promoted. There we go. So are we,
We're missing Dave Shreve and Mr. Ray, Director Ray.
no, George,
Oh, here he is. So that makes 5 of 6. Is that right?
yeah. Well, why don't we, let's go ahead and you want to put the certification up and we can go ahead and do it and vote on it. And if he's able to join in, he can cast his vote of concurrence when he joins in.
I thought someone was dropping off at 6:30.
Yeah,
I'm
he had a
going
meeting.
to
Director
real soon.
Munson, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I move that the EDA certify by recorded vote that to the best of each director's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorizing the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second
All right,
that motion.
second. Richie, would you call the roll, please?
Let's see, Director Long,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Shreve, Director Munson,
Aye.
Director Imhoff,
Aye.
Director Matola.
Aye.
All right.
And has Director Shreve, has he appeared?
I haven't,
No.
he's not showing up as a panelist yet. So,
Not yet. We're working on it.
Well, the
All
motion
right.
would carry.
okay, thank you. So we're out of closed session. Any unfinished business?
Don, you had mentioned you wanted to talk about the status of our meetings going forward. I think Mr. Walker's still on the call.
Yeah, I'm glad to do that
Okay.
very quick, very
Yep.
quickly. The board tomorrow will be taking action to end the local emergency after 2 years. That'll have some effect, but it won't be effective for the board until the April the 4th, meaning that the board's first in-person meeting in 2 years will be on Wednesday, April the 6th. That's the Board of Supervisors. The intention is to group the public bodies into tiers to come back over a period of time. The continuity of government operations ordinance remains in effect to allow us to have kind of a deceleration lane or I guess an on-ramp, off-ramp, however you want to characterize it. And so the three bodies that will be first will be the Board of Supervisors, the School Board, and a Planning Commission. The EDA would be in the second tier, likely not before June. So heading into midsummer, into later summer, we'd be then talking about a return to in-person meetings for the EDA and others that are in that tier 2 category. So that's what I would share with you. I think you should expect to stay in this platform for another few months. And then of course, we'll keep you updated as things move forward.
And Mr. Walker, is it fair to state that the reason for the tiers has to do with ongoing support and capacity in terms of technology? It's not practical for everyone to move at one time because hybrid meetings require additional resources.
There are choices that are going to be made about which meetings will be supported in a hybrid format and which ones will not. In terms of just because of the technology that's required, support that's required. And we've made a lot of changes in our use of technology. And so we need to kind of work through that on a fairly limited basis before we kind of expand it. So yes.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. That's helpful.
I'll just say it seems reasonable that because we've upfitted both Lane Auditorium and 241 in the county office building to allow for hybrid meetings, that the EDA would fall into that category of using 241 for a hybrid meeting. That's all. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? I know it's late, so. All right, well, I think that is it. We will adjourn this meeting. And our next meeting will be April 19th. And we'll send the invitation out about that. Anything else before we leave? Sure you guys don't want to stay longer.
Nice try.
All right, thanks. And I
Thank
commend our
you.
attendees for sticking it out till the end.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao.